When the applause faded, the speaker said he was happy to be in Montreal because he loved the city. He joked that it felt like Paris, but cheaper. 11 years before, in 2014, Joan Rivers went for a simple throat surgery that was supposed to be quick and safe. But she never woke up again. At first, the story the public heard sounded straightforward, but over the years, more information came out. Melissa, Joan's daughter, filed a lawsuit and exposed shocking details. The doctors had taken selfies while Joan was unconscious. They performed medical procedures she never approved. They didn't even record her weight, something that is required before anesthesia. But there was something even more personal and painful that Melissa had kept secret for years. Joan had attempted suicide twice before, and nobody knew. Melissa also revealed that the number of plastic surgeries people thought Joan had was not true. Today, the real story she admitted is finally coming out. Joan Alexandra Molinsky, later known as Joan Rivers, was born on June 8, 1933, in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. She grew up on New York Avenue. Her father, Dr. Maya Molinsky, was a doctor who loved doing funny impressions, and her mother, Beatrice, was a librarian who lived with a deep fear of poverty. Because of that fear, she pushed the family to focus on money and success. Their home was full of ambition but also pressure and worry. Outside, the neighborhood felt safe and warm, with kids riding bikes and people greeting each other. But inside Joan's home, the fear of failing hung over everything. When Joan was only 8 years old, she created an imaginary alter ego named J. Sandre Meredith. Standing in front of her mirror, she pretended to be elegant, confident, and glamorous, everything her mother hoped she would become. These pretend performances were more than just fun. They helped her escape from her insecurities and the stress in her home. They planted the first seeds of her future career. Performing became her way of surviving emotionally. Joan went to the Ethical Culture School and later Adelphi Academy, where she discovered how much she loved acting. She was performing in school plays before she turned 17, and by 1949, she was already the vice president of the school's drama club. But even with all her talent, Joan struggled inside. She felt uncomfortable with her body and worried constantly about her weight. These insecurities stayed with her for the rest of her life. Later, she would turn this pain into jokes, making people laugh while she hid how much it truly hurt her. Her family eventually moved to Larchmont, an upscale suburb that was mostly non-Jewish. There, Joan faced cruel bullying. Kids mocked her for her accent, her appearance, and her Jewish background. The rejection cut deeply. But it also taught her an important skill: humor could protect her. She used sharp jokes as her shield. She learned to speak fast, hit back first, and not let anyone see how much she hurt inside. This was the beginning of the fierce, fearless comedic voice she would become famous for. Joan graduated from Adelphi Academy in 1951 and went to Connecticut College for Women. Later, she transferred to Barnard College and graduated in 1954 with a degree in English literature. She sometimes claimed she graduated with high honors, but that wasn't true. It was part of the image she carefully crafted over the years, something she would continue doing throughout her career. After college, Joan took any job she could get. She worked as a tour guide at Rockefeller Center, a fashion advisor at Bond clothing stores, and a proofreader at an advertising agency. They were not glamorous jobs, but they helped her survive. At Bonds, she met James Sanger, a man who seemed perfect for her parents' expectations. She married him in 1955, but the marriage ended only 6 months later when she discovered he never wanted children. The annulment devastated her parents but pushed Joan toward a different realization: she didn't want a safe, predictable life. She wanted to perform. In 1959, she started calling herself Joan Rivers and began performing in small clubs around Greenwich Village. Her shows didn't go well at first. Crowds heckled her, and agents dismissed her. One manager told her she was too old and that if she was going to be successful, it would have already happened. But she refused to give up. She spent nights eating cheap meals with other struggling newcomers like Woody Allen and George Carlin. She even acted with a young Barbra Streisand in a tiny off-Broadway play that lasted only 6 weeks. In 1961, she auditioned for Second City in Chicago, a major comedy group. She was nervous and panicked during the audition. She even threw an ashtray in the middle of it. But the next day, she got a call saying she was hired. She cried with relief. Second City helped her find her style and confidence. She created characters like Rita and learned how to use sharp, fearless humor. She later said she truly became a comedian on that stage. Her life changed forever on February 17, 1965. After years of rejection, Joan finally appeared on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. She had failed during the earlier Jack Paar era and was terrified of messing up again. But that night, she was brilliant. Carson laughed and told her, "You're going to be a star." That moment launched her career. Bookings poured in, and her life transformed almost instantly. Around the same time, she took a writing job for Topo Gigio, the mouse puppet on The Ed Sullivan Show. She earned $500 for each sketch, which was a huge amount for her. She joked she would have written for Hitler if it paid that much. The job wasn't glamorous, but it opened important doors. She started writing for comedians like Phyllis Diller and Bob Newhart. Her appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show in 1966 happened accidentally. Sullivan meant to announce singer Joan Rivers but accidentally said Joan Rivers, and they booked her to fix the mistake. During this time, Joan often joked about plastic surgery. She made funny lines about wanting fat removed and personality added. NBC censors worried about these jokes, but Carson encouraged her to keep going. By the age of 32, she had likely already had her first eye lift. In 1968, she launched her own daytime talk show called That Show with Joan Rivers. Each episode revolved around a theme. Johnny Carson even appeared on her very first show to support her. Although she featured big celebrities like Don Rickles and Jerry Lewis, the show ended in 1970. It was Joan's first major public failure, but it wouldn't be her last. That same year, she released a comedy album called Presents Mr. Phyllis and Other Funny Stories. The album included pieces like The Fat Girl, where she openly talked about her insecurities. She turned real pain into humor, making people laugh while exposing her deepest struggles. The album wasn't a big hit, but it helped shape her powerful comedic identity. In 1968, Joan stepped into a completely different world, dramatic film. She appeared in The Swimmer with Burt Lancaster. Many people mistakenly believe she did this in 1972, but it actually happened 4 years earlier. The experience was frustrating. Lancaster kept telling her to deliver her lines differently, and the director, Frank Perry, had his own ideas. One wanted her character to be warm and emotional, while the other wanted her to be cold. Joan tried to satisfy both, and the back and forth made the whole process confusing. One tiny scene took far longer than anyone expected. It was an early lesson in how difficult movie sets could be for women trying to do something new. Just a year later, she took another risk with her voice. In 1969, she released the next-to-last Joan Rivers album, not in 1973, as many people mistakenly say. This album was more than comedy. It was groundbreaking. She talked about topics women almost never discussed publicly: abortion, homosexuality, and emotional pain hidden behind laughter. Because she wasn't allowed to say the word abortion, she joked about women having 14 appendectomies. That showed how strict the rules were at the time. She also made jokes about her gay hairdresser, Mr. Phyllis, long before the country was ready for that kind of humor. She had already released Mr. Phyllis and Other Funny Stories in 1965, but the 1969 album felt much stronger and bolder. It spread quietly but powerfully among audiences who had never heard a woman speak like that before. Her comedy albums didn't top the charts, but they made her unforgettable. After that came The Bright Lights of Las Vegas. Many people think she started performing there in 1975, but she was already on those stages years earlier. In 1969, she co-headlined with John Davidson at the Riviera. She made her Caesars Palace debut in 1972, opening for Paul Anka, and after that, Las Vegas couldn't get enough of her. The Sahara, the Frontier, the MGM Grand, and the Desert Inn all booked her. But Vegas had no idea how bold she really was. She joked about abortion, plastic surgery, cheating husbands, and anything most performers would never say out loud. She once said that a man could sleep with anyone with no judgment, but if a woman made 19 or 20 mistakes, she was labeled a terrible name. One of her boldest jokes was, "My vagina is like Newark. Men know it's there, but they don't want to visit." By 1984, she was earning $50,000 per show and had a contract worth $12 million over 3 years. She wasn't just doing comedy, she was changing what women were allowed to talk about on stage. She pushed boundaries in a way no other female performer had ever done. In 1978, she took another risk and wrote and directed a movie called Rabbit Test. Billy Crystal starred as the world's first pregnant man. Her husband, Edgar Rosenberg, produced it. On paper, it sounded like a crazy, original comedy idea. The movie earned $12 million on a budget under $1 million, so it wasn't a financial failure. But the critics hated it. The movie had too many cameo appearances and jokes that didn't land. Billy Barty even appeared in blackface, which reviewers found offensive. Critics called it vulgar. Roger Ebert was harsh. IMDb scored it extremely low, and the Metascore was only 20. After that one film, she never directed another movie again. Edgar wasn't just her producer. He was the center of her life and her career. Joan married Edgar on July 15, 1965, only 5 days after they met. She was rewriting a screenplay in Jamaica when he hired her, and things moved fast. They married in a rush, and that same night Joan performed 2 shows at the bitter end. In 1968, they had their daughter, Melissa Warburg Rosenberg. Joan even appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show while she was 8 months pregnant, at a time when women weren't even allowed to say the word pregnant on TV. Edgar shaped her career with total dedication. They called it the career, as if it were alive. Joan also used motherhood in her comedy. She wrote bedtime stories as jokes and taught Melissa how to turn anything in life into a punchline. Their partnership lasted 22 years until Edgar's tragic suicide in 1987. It broke her personal life and destroyed the foundation of her career. Then came the golden opportunity, The Tonight Show. In August 1983, Joan Rivers became the permanent guest host for Johnny Carson, something no woman had ever achieved. Between 1983 and 1986, she guest hosted 190 times, setting a record. For 2 weeks straight, she even hosted every single night. On July 26, 1984, she hosted a historic broadcast, the first American TV episode ever aired in MTS stereo. Only New York viewers with WNBC could hear the stereo version, but it was still a huge moment. Joan often called herself Johnny Carson's daughter because their bond meant that much to her. Everyone believed she would eventually take over The Tonight Show. She almost did. In 1983, Joan released a comedy album called What Becomes a Semi-Legend Most on Geffen Records. It reached number 22 on the Billboard 200 and earned her a Grammy nomination for Best Comedy Album in 1984. But the album also started a feud. Elizabeth Taylor became one of Joan's favorite targets. Joan joked about her weight, her diet books, and her personal life. Elizabeth Taylor fired back in interviews, calling Joan a mean and nasty woman. Joan didn't stop. She also introduced the character Heidi Abramovitz on that album, a fictional woman known for being promiscuous. The jokes were bold and unapologetic, and they created both laughs and enemies. In 1994, Joan finally pursued her Broadway dream. She co-wrote and starred in a play called Sally Marr and Her Escorts, based on the real mother of comedian Lenny Bruce. The show opened after 27 previews and ran for 50 performances. Joan received a Tony nomination for Best Actress and a Drama Desk nomination as well. But the run was short and reviews were mixed. Some critics thought she was using Lenny Bruce's tragic life to get attention. On the night the reviewers came, Joan had been taking prednisone and accidentally skipped entire scenes. That mistake hurt the reviews badly. Still, she loved the play so deeply that she chose to be buried with a copy of the script. If you've ever heard a red carpet reporter ask, "Who are you wearing?" you can thank Joan Rivers. She transformed fashion coverage. Before her, the red carpet was all about the films. After her, it became all about the clothes. Some say her fashion commentary began in 1991 at the Golden Globes, but she had been shaping it earlier than that. She turned red carpet interviews into major entertainment. She called out cheap designer copycats live on camera. She created Fashion Police, which became must-watch TV. She helped turn designers into celebrities and made fashion a huge part of Hollywood culture. And then there was her face. Joan was unusually honest about her cosmetic procedures. She joked about them constantly. She publicly said she'd had 7 or 39 surgeries, but Melissa later revealed the real number was closer to 365. Joan had her first surgery, an eye lift, at age 32 in 1965, right after her big break on The Carson Show. After that, she got Botox every 6 months, had facelifts, nose jobs, liposuction, and more. She once joked that after a facelift gone wrong, she looked like a Shar-Pei puppy. That joke became famous. She talked so openly about her surgeries that she removed the shame from them. She didn't just normalize cosmetic procedures, she helped turn them into part of mainstream culture. Joan made television history on October 9, 1986, when she became the first woman ever to host a late-night network talk show. The Late Show starring Joan Rivers premiered on the brand-new Fox network with huge guests like Elton John, Cher, David Lee Roth, and Pee Wee Herman. The energy was electric. It looked like she was about to redefine late-night TV. But only a few weeks later, the excitement began to fade, and the challenges started to grow. Many famous celebrities stayed away from Joan Rivers' show because they were afraid of upsetting Johnny Carson, who was the king of late-night TV. Carson wasn't happy that Joan got her own show, and people believed that if they appeared with her, he would ban them from The Tonight Show. That fear became real. Ratings for her show began to drop quickly. What looked funny and exciting when she guest-hosted for Carson did not work as well every single night. Viewers slowly lost interest. By March 1987, the show was already being called a failure, and even the Associated Press reported that things were falling apart. Behind the scenes, problems were growing. Joan's husband, Edgar Rosenberg, who was also the executive producer, clashed with Fox chairman Barry Diller. Their arguments went public, and newspapers began covering the drama. Everyone was looking for someone to blame. When Joan first accepted the job, she tried to do the polite thing and called Johnny Carson directly to tell him. But he didn't say anything. He hung up the phone, and from that moment on, he never spoke to her again. She had been loyal to him for 18 years as his guest host, but he felt she had betrayed him. He had allowed other comedians like Bill Cosby, George Carlin, and David Brenner to move on without any problem, but this time he reacted differently. He reportedly told Jay Leno, "She's dead to me." After that, her name, photos, and even her comedy albums were removed from anything connected to The Tonight Show. Guests who appeared on her show were no longer welcome on Carson's. Joan believed his anger was not just about loyalty. She felt he treated her like property, like she was supposed to belong to him simply because she was a woman. She once said, "I think he really felt because I was a woman that I just was his." She did not return to NBC's Late Night World until Jimmy Fallon invited her back in February 2014, nearly 50 years after her first appearance. Sadly, she passed away 6 months later. By May 15, 1987, her late-night show had produced around 150 episodes. That day, she taped her final one with guests like Howie Mandel, Chris Rock, and Paul Rubens. She already knew the end had arrived. Fox executives had decided to fire both her and her husband. Joan later said the way they were fired was humiliating. Edgar was blamed publicly for everything, and Barry Diller made it clear he believed Edgar had mishandled the show. Fox had invested millions of dollars in the project, but by the end, the network had lost nearly $100 million on late-night programming. They had to pay Joan the remaining $10 million of her contract just to terminate the deal. After firing her, Fox replaced her with Arsenio Hall, whose energy was fresh and appealing to viewers. His guest appearances were so successful that he later got his own late-night show. 3 months after Joan and Edgar were let go, tragedy struck. On August 14, 1987, Edgar Rosenberg took his own life in a hotel room in Philadelphia. He overdosed on Valium and alcohol. Investigators found 3 tapes where he called himself a clogged wheel and talked about his failing health. He had suffered a heart attack before, which led to quadruple bypass surgery. He had been in and out of hospitals and felt like a burden to Joan. He even said he could no longer travel with her. When he died, Joan was left alone, unemployed, and drowning in financial problems. Most news reports said she owed $6 million, but the real number was closer to $37 million. Joan later admitted, "It all fell apart fast. I'm not a businesswoman. My husband was a businessman." She said a con man had taken her company public, stolen its money, and even bought the rights to her own name. For a while, she couldn't legally sell jewelry or put her name on anything. Her daughter, Melissa, blamed her for Edgar's death, and their relationship suffered under the weight of grief and anger. But Joan refused to give up. She used all her pain as motivation to rebuild her life. Her jokes became sharper and more fearless. Her books became bolder and more honest. Even before the scandal, she had written The Life and Hard Times of Heidi Abramovitz in 1984. It looked like a fake biography, but it was actually a disguised book full of Hollywood gossip and secrets. She exposed the double standards of celebrities but hid them inside the life of a fictional character. She never held back. Later, she used her own downfall as comedy. She turned ageism, sexism, rejection, and humiliation into jokes that connected with people who felt invisible or unwanted. She kept touring, kept working, and slowly rebuilt her career over the next 27 years. By 1989, she was back on TV with The Joan Rivers Show. It premiered on September 5th, and this time she took a different approach. She embraced daytime television, made the show more personal, more unpredictable, and more honest. In June 1990, she won a Daytime Emmy Award for Outstanding Talk Show Host. During her emotional acceptance speech, she said, "2 years ago, I couldn't get a job. This is really for him," referring to Edgar. The show ran until 1993 and produced more than 900 episodes. She never made the show quiet or polite. She welcomed controversial topics, unpredictable guests, and surprising moments. It was messy, but that chaos made it unforgettable. Entertainment Weekly called it the perfect match for her wild and spontaneous personality. During that time, Joan became famous for making jokes about Elizabeth Taylor. Some people say she made around 850 jokes about her. She said things like, "She puts mayonnaise on aspirin," and, "When she pierced her ears, gravy ran out." Even though the jokes were harsh, the truth was different. Elizabeth Taylor didn't take it personally. Their mutual friend, Roddy McDowell, said Taylor could laugh at herself. In 1985, they even made peace publicly at a charity event. What looked like a feud was really more like performance art. Joan's humor always mixed truth with exaggeration. In 1990, desperate for money, Joan took a huge risk and joined QVC. At that time, QVC was known for selling products from forgotten celebrities. But Joan launched her jewelry line with just one item, a bee pin inspired by one Edgar had given her. It sold out within minutes. That moment changed her life. It launched a massive business empire. Joan personally approved every design and every product. By 2014, her QVC sales had crossed $1 billion. Her classics collection alone made around $4.5 million every year. She registered her official trademark in 1996 and went on to release more than 6,000 different products. What started as a desperate attempt to make money became one of her biggest business victories. Joan was not the host of the Tony Awards in 1993. Liza Minnelli hosted that year, but Joan remained close with her because Liza had appeared on her show before and they supported each other as friends. Joan's real Broadway success came a year later, showing how she rebuilt her entire life by the mid-1990s. She had recovered from heartbreak, financial disaster, and career failure. Her talk show was successful again, her jewelry business was growing stronger every year, and her stage work was earning respect. Just when people thought she had done everything she could, she surprised everyone again. In 1995, the red carpet changed forever because of her. Before Joan, the red carpet was calm. Reporters simply asked who celebrities were wearing and moved on. Joan made it into something completely different. She didn't just ask questions, she said exactly what she thought. When Nicole Kidman wore a bright Chartreuse Dior gown to the 1997 Oscars, Joan looked into the camera, pretended to gag, and said it was the ugliest dress she had ever seen. It was harsh, But it was also hilarious, and it made people tune in just to hear her reactions. Suddenly, the red carpet wasn't a safe place anymore. Celebrities knew one wrong outfit could put them directly in Joan's line of fire. By 1996, live from the red carpet became more important than some award shows themselves. Actresses started hiring teams of stylists just to avoid being roasted by Joan. And Joan enjoyed every second of it. A few years later, she turned the concept into a full TV show. Fashion Police launched in 2010 with Joan leading a panel of bold, sharp-tongued co-hosts. The show wasn't just about clothes, it was entertainment. Segments like Bitch Stole My Look and Starlet or Streetwalker became viral hits. Fans watched every week, sometimes just to hear Joan's newest joke. She once said a dress looked like a couch cushion, and she said another looked like a broken umbrella. In 2012, the show expanded to a full hour. After her death, a special tribute episode in 2014 brought in over 1 million viewers, the highest Friday ratings E! Had seen in 2 years. Joan had turned fashion criticism into mainstream entertainment. But fashion TV wasn't her only empire. Her QVC brand was legendary. She sold over $1 billion in products there. Joan didn't just promote items, she helped design them. In 2013 alone, she sold 1.2 million pieces. On November 19, 2012, she sold 88,000 luxury sequin scarves in one day, a moment that became QVC history. Her shows on QVC were scheduled months in advance, and she was set to appear on September 12 and 26 in 2014. She never made it to those dates. Joan died suddenly on September 4, but her brand stayed alive. Most celebrity product lines disappear when the star is gone. Hers didn't, and that wasn't luck, it was the result of decades of work and loyalty from her fans. In 2009, she joined The Celebrity Apprentice. Many people didn't expect much from her because she was 75 at the time. But she outperformed everyone. She beat Khloe Kardashian, Dennis Rodman, and even professional poker champion Annie Duke. Annie raised more money in the final task, but Joan still won because she delivered a better overall experience, stronger product placement, and a bigger celebrity turnout. For her charity, she earned $250,000 from winning the show and raised over $526,000 total that season. The boardroom fights between Joan and Annie became famous. Joan called Annie two-faced. Annie called Joan a cancer. Their arguments shocked viewers, but also made them tune in even more. Plastic surgery was something Joan never tried to hide. She talked about it openly and made fun of herself. She once joked that she'd had 739 procedures, a number doctors said wasn't possible, but Joan didn't care. She loved exaggerating for comedy. In her 2012 book, she joked that plastic surgery was like a gym membership, you keep going even when you see no difference. She got Botox regularly and fillers whenever she felt she needed them. While other celebrities denied going under the knife, Joan embraced it. It became part of her personality. Her reality show, Joan and Melissa, Joan Knows Best, premiered on WeTV on January 25, 2011. It lasted 4 seasons and followed Joan as she moved in with Melissa, argued with her constantly, and continued her quest for more cosmetic procedures. In one episode, she asked 3 different Beverly Hills surgeons for an arm lift. All of them refused, saying she looked great for her age. Joan joked, "I'll find someone in a van." That episode aired on January 24, 2012. The show reached as many as 1.5 million viewers at its peak. Joan pushed every boundary and then went beyond it. She didn't hold back with politicians either. On The Late Show with David Letterman in 2013, she joked that Hillary Clinton needed a makeover and poked fun at her bangs, saying they probably saved money on Botox. Some people were furious. Joan doubled down. She said she would happily help fix Hillary's hair and still described Clinton as one of the greatest women in history. Joan always mixed roasting with compliments. When people complained, she used their complaints as more material for her stand-up. 5 months after her death, in February 2015, Joan won a Grammy for Best Spoken Word Album for her book Diary of a Mad Diva. It was filled with jokes about aging and death, making the award bittersweet. Melissa accepted on her behalf. Joan had also won a Grammy in 1984. 30 years apart, she proved she never lost her edge. Her career wasn't only about glamour. In 1987, she voiced Dot Matrix, a robot character in Mel Brooks's film Spaceballs. The robot had a Virgin alarm and Joan's signature sass. She joked about the character for decades, especially when referencing her surgeries. She called herself a cyborg face and laughed about it. Spaceballs became a cult classic. Even in 2025, when a sequel was announced, fans knew Dot Matrix couldn't return because no one could replace Joan's voice. She also stirred controversy on Twitter. She joked about Pope Francis's white robes, saying he broke fashion rules by wearing white before Memorial Day. Many people were offended. When Adele won a Grammy in 2013, Joan mocked her weight on Letterman, puffing her cheeks and spreading her arms. The audience booed. Joan didn't back down. She repeated the joke on HuffPost Live and said Adele was overweight. It was cruel, but it was also typical Joan. When people told her she went too far, she went even further. In 2017, Joan was inducted into the Television Academy Hall of Fame, 3 years after her death. Melissa accepted the award while people remembered that Joan had been the first woman to host a late-night talk show in 1986. That achievement alone changed television forever. Rolling Stone ranked her 6th among the greatest stand-up comedians of all time. Chris Hardwick called her an innovator. Chelsea Handler said she paved the way for female comedians. Even Whoopi Goldberg, not always a fan, showed her respect. Her death was heartbreaking. On August 28, 2014, she went in for a routine throat procedure at Yorkville Endoscopy in Manhattan. She never woke up. Later, it was discovered that the doctors performed a procedure she had not agreed to. One of them even took selfies with her while she was unconscious. They didn't record her weight or follow safety rules, and by the time someone called 911, it was too late. Joan was 81. Melissa filed a lawsuit, and the case was settled in 2016. She said the fight was not about money, it was about truth and accountability. In 2015, Melissa published the Book of Joan, which revealed private moments Joan never talked about publicly. The book shared that Joan had attempted suicide twice, once in the 1950s after a breakup, and again in 1987 after Edgar's suicide, when she lost her job, her contracts, and felt completely destroyed. She sat with a gun in her lap until her dog Spike jumped onto her and made her realize she still had a reason to live. The book showed the woman behind the jokes, the human pain beneath the punchlines. Joan's will, filed in December 2014, listed her estate at around $150 million. Melissa received most of it, including a $35 million Manhattan apartment. Joan's grandson received a trust fund, and she also left money for her niece, nephew, and 5 staff members. She donated to charities like God's Love We Deliver, Guide Dogs for the Blind, and the Simon Wiesenthal Center. Even after death, she kept giving. In May 2025, NBC aired a major tribute special called Joan Rivers, a Dead Funny All-Star Tribute. Tiffany Haddish performed a rap about Joan. Nikki Glaser roasted the audience in true Joan style. Rachel Brosnahan, whose character in The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel was inspired by Joan, delivered a rapid-fire minute of jokes. Melissa sat in the front row, listening to the laughter that had defined her mother's life. 11 years had passed, but Joan's voice, humor, and legacy still echoed loudly.